and thanks for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and the subject today is race. Race in America, that we'll talk about over several of our shows coming up. Today it's my pleasure to have here in the studio Professor Martha S. Jones of Johns Hopkins University. She's the author of Birthright Citizens, A History of Race and Rights in Antebellum America, as well as the author of All Bound Up Together, The Woman Question in African American Public Culture, and a wonderful essay in Votes for Women, A Portrait of Persistence, which accompanies the exhibit in the Portrait Gallery in the Smithsonian up until January of 2020. So you still have time to see it. It is fantastic. Thank you so much, Martha, for being here.
Thanks for having me
today. I just want to let you know that I took my 10-year-old granddaughter to that exhibit at the Portrait Gallery, and it was astonishing to see Black women so prominently displayed, a real part of the story of getting the vote for women.
All credit to Caitlin May, who was the curator at the National Portrait Gallery, who I think when she recognized that the Portrait Gallery collection was not representative of the nation as a whole, of Black women in particular, really scoured the country to ensure that African American women would be not only represented, but really a center of the story of women in the vote. She borrows, for example, from the Oberlin College collection and their archives, where we know some of the very first Black women in the United States to attend college, to graduate from college, went to Oberlin.
Right.
And their portraits as young women are now in our National Portrait Gallery.
Well, it was sensational. My little Avery was taking pictures hither and yon, and I love that the chronology, the book that you can order, where you order your books, called Votes for Women, is sensational. And you've written an essay in there that talks about the political life, present and past, of women, Black women in America. Talk to us about how you approach that, because it's an unusual. You know, it's not a this happened, that happened, that. You tell it as a live story.
Well, I think that in some ways I wanted to start in our own time and help us appreciate that the women, the African American women who today we recognize as integral to the beat of American politics, whether it's Stacey Abrams in Georgia or Mrs. Obama, so many Black women who now figure importantly in our political life, that these aren't women who came out of nowhere, that they come out of a long, centuries-long history of Black women's activism. So this is the first thing. The second piece is that I think many Americans are familiar with a story about women's suffrage that goes something like, there was a women's meeting in Seneca Falls in 1848, and it ended in 1920 with the passage of the 19th Amendment. Well, that is not the story for African American women, and so we need to go back in time to the 1830s, certainly, with figures like Maria Stewart, the very first American woman to speak about politics from a podium is an African American woman in Boston. It's extraordinary. So we have to start there.
We do. And the chronology of the history of this starts in 1832 with the Black Women's Gathering. Tell us about that.
Well, African American women are organizing in part around anti-slavery activism by the 1830s. They are also organizing in their own mutual aid societies and engaged in what then we might think of as self-help, but that is to say, teaching one another to read, teaching one another rudimentary mathematics, how to run a household, how to write a letter, how to enter public life, publish in an anti-slavery newspaper. These are the starts of women's rights for Black women. This is the start of their political educations that will culminate for many in voting rights but doesn't begin with the vote.
Right, right. And you've written an entire book about that, about women, black women. And was it Frances Harper, her quote that you're using in the title?
Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, yes. We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity. And this really, for me, captures the essence of how African American women come to the question of voting rights, which is that they are always interested in human rights. They understand the purpose of their political power as they build it, as they fight for it, is the betterment of all Black America, but I think Harper would say all America benefits, right, when we have our equality.
Right, right. Well, it came to mind because suddenly you were the center of all news for a few weeks here. Baltimore being insulted, mightily from high on. People talking about birthright citizenship, and you've written an entire book about that. First, tell me about Baltimore, because I wasn't so aware that in the 1800s there were so many free blacks living in the city of Baltimore.
Yeah, it turns out if you want to ask hard questions about early African American life, particularly in those years where slowly, unevenly, and through great struggle we are moving from a slave or an enslaved society to a free society, Baltimore is the case study. A slave-holding state all the way through the Civil War, where in the city of Baltimore, in addition to famous figures like Frederick Douglass, who we all know spent important time in Baltimore, there are on the eve of the Civil War 25,000 free African Americans who have built for themselves a public culture of churches, of benevolent societies, all as an expression, as a manifestation of their claim that they are citizens of the United States. They are not sojourners, they are not passing through, they are not transients. And they make manifest their aspiration to permanence by building their own community in Baltimore.
But then gradually losing them as well.
Absolutely. And so this is not a triumphalist narrative. It is not a story of progress that proceeds unimpeded. It is a story of struggle and the ways in which Black Americans across generations confront that struggle. The people I write about in Birthright Citizens were the children, some of them, of men who actually voted in the state of Maryland until the beginning of the 19th century. It's a story of then losing the vote, losing political rights, and then that struggle to regain those rights that come in the era of the Civil War.
Well, it's astonishing because here we are, we're going to talk about the 14th Amendment now.
Hold on to your hats, people. Right. It's a little legal history.
I love talking about the Constitution. But so the 14th Amendment, most people, when they think about that, they think about African Americans, former slaves, and that was when Dred Scott was turned over, and in fact, former slaves could be citizens.
Yes.
But that really is the basis of everything else that's happened in this country since, because what it says is not just African Americans, former slaves, it is anybody who was born in this country on this land or naturalized, except for the diplomats. We'll set them aside.
Tiny exception.
Okay, a teeny tiny exception. Everybody else is a United States citizen.
Yeah. So the story here is about the way in which Black Americans, as they wage a struggle right out of their own interest, trying to resolve their own status as former slaves and now free people, are redefining citizenship for the entire nation. And with the ratification of the 14th Amendment in 1868, we have the introduction of birthright citizenship unequivocally in the U.S. Constitution, and this is a benefit to every person born in the United States. Yes, to former slaves, but until our own time. I'm born here in New York City. I am a U.S. citizen because I am a birthright citizen by virtue of having been born on this soil in this nation. And that is a powerful practice and approach to citizenship that touches many, many, many of our lives.
Well, many would say it's the essence of who we are as Americans, but where have I heard this birthright citizenship conversation? And it's, again, from on high, someone suggesting that we take it away. I mean, which would totally upend who we are as Americans and what we believe in. We have a clip in the news, powerfully, incredibly, where four women of color, congresswomen who came in 2018, who were told to essentially go back home, go wherever it was that you came from.
So the first note that I want to tell children across this country is that no matter what the president says, this country belongs to you. Mm-hmm. And it belongs to everyone. And today, that very notion was challenged. This weekend, that very notion was challenged. So I am not surprised when the president says that 4 sitting members of Congress should, quote, go back to their own country, when he has authorized raids without warrants on thousands of families across this country.
Despite the occupant of the White House attempts to marginalize us and to silence us, please know that we are more than 4 people. We ran on a mandate to advocate for and to represent those ignored, left out, and left behind. Our squad is big. Our squad includes any person committed to building a more equitable and just world. And that is the work that we want to get back to. And given the size of this squad and this great nation, we will not be silenced.
So powerful and so tragic that they have to tell children, don't be afraid, this is your country if you were born here. When you see what's going on at the borders and the incredible separation of families and this entire insulting of huge groups of people, what goes through your mind, knowing the history of Baltimore and the 14th Amendment and all of this, the work to get this done in this country?
Well, it certainly takes me back to an earlier tragic era, the decades before the Civil War, in which Black Americans, many of them former slaves, the descendants of enslaved people, are faced with this sort of rhetoric, with these sorts of ideas. When Chief Justice Roger Taney in the Dred Scott decision says, no Black person can be a citizen of the United States, this is the echoes, right, of that idea, that race and racism should arbitrate who is an American and who is not. And what I hear in the words of these Congress members, these courageous Congress members, is no, that actually we are a nation that has the capacity, as it did in the 19th century, to profoundly rethink our principles and our regimes of national belonging to become a more inclusive, a more democratic nation. In the 19th century, we were able to recognize that former slaves had spent generations building this nation, building their families and their communities, investing in this nation in its earliest and most vulnerable decades, that we could rethink who those people were and embrace them by the Constitution. And what I hear Congressmember Presley saying is, isn't it time, right, for us to rethink how it is that we define who is an American and who belongs? And then I hear those words to children, because part of what this era has done is instill terror, right, into families, into young people, very much the way former slaves lived under the specter of a kind of terror.
Yeah, we were talking briefly yesterday about there's so many people who want to say that this comes all from the top and whatever, and you have a different assessment of what's going on in this country now, that really is very low level, spread out discrimination and snatching away of this birthright going on in the country. Talk a little bit about that.
One of the important chapters in our early history of citizenship is that of the experience of Chinese Americans, who even after the 14th Amendment, even after the establishment of birthright citizenship, are doubted by some federal officials. They doubt the citizenship of Chinese-born Americans. So, what happens? Not an executive order, not an amendment of the Constitution. It needs not right away. As much what happens is that in everyday ways, customs officials, border agents is what we would call them today, begin to detain, to jail, to question in a quite literal way whether or not Chinese Americans, for example, should be readmitted into the country at the port of San Francisco after they've made a visit to China on business. Well, I think that's part of what we're seeing today is, yes, we have to be vigilant about what's coming from Washington, without a doubt. But as much so, we must be vigilant about what's happening in an everyday way at our borders. U.S. citizens seeking to re-enter the country from Mexico, detained, jailed, questioned.
For weeks at a time.
For weeks at a time. This, to me, is an assault, right? Yeah, at a low level, at an everyday level, targeting Americans who don't have perhaps immediate access to lawyers and to courts and to advocates. Nonetheless, this is an assault on all of our claim to birthright citizenship. If you can do that to one person, be certain, right, that all of us are fragile, all of us are vulnerable to this kind of rethinking of whether or not we belong to this country.
So we haven't heard any loud talking about removing birthright citizenship lately. But do you think it could be done by executive order? And what do you think would happen the day that that order is issued in this country?
What I think I know is that the president is at liberty to issue an executive order on any terms he might choose. Whether that executive order will pass constitutional scrutiny, that is to say, does the president have the authority to, in essence, abrogate the Constitution by executive order, will ultimately be a question for the U.S. Supreme Court. I think you know that we have a U.S. Supreme Court today that is not tested on these questions. So when the Congress member reassures young people that they are Americans, that they belong, that is essential and important. But to make good on that, should the president issue an executive order, will require a battle, right? And that battle will happen in our federal courts.
Yeah, I think that you pointed out this idea of suddenly being nobody in a sense, or you're not American anymore, you're not, I mean, what happens? In the old days, the Back to Africa movement, for instance, where, you know, they would say, go back to Africa, and some wanted to go back to Africa, but it's like this true homelessness where you have no country, that would be the status for millions of people in this country.
And we live in a world, of course, where we can point to thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are rendered stateless, right, I think is the term. What does it mean to be a person without a state, without a nation, without that kind of political identity is the question on the table for us in this moment. Who are children in this country who are birthright citizens whose parents have been detained and deported? Where is their place?
Because that citizenship does not automatically, I mean, their parents could become naturalized citizens, but the children are automatically American citizens.
Absolutely. And then the question is sort of, where is one's allegiance? And this is a question, right, that we as Black Americans know well. And my view is two things are possible, right? It's possible to be a birthright citizen and entitled to all the rights and privileges and subject to all the obligations that attend that, and at the same time be a critic and appreciate that we look across a vast globe, some of us, and wonder if there aren't other places that might better extend to us
That
belonging and rights. In the 19th
But there are some
century,
countries that don't have birthrights. Many.
absolutely.
So that even if you're born there, you will never become a citizen of X, Y, or Z. So we are special in that way. That's how this country was formed, was created. I want to ask you a couple of questions about yourself, because I see all of this deep scholarship and the move to Baltimore, and you're like the Baltimore expert. What did you say when you heard the insults spewed out about an American city?
Well, I was one of those who got on my social media to post my pictures of my city and my life, right? We are Baltimore. We are not, right, what the president, that which the president sort of fed to the nation a few weeks ago. My hometown newspaper, the Baltimore Sun, put it pretty aptly, I have to say. The Sun said something to the effect, better to have a few rats than to be one. And I think that summed up the way a lot of us
for a
felt.
newspaper
It was,
editorial department.
But we deserved that.
Right.
We deserved that kind of perspective, right? Which is to say, our city has challenges. Our city is not a simple place, what American city is, but for an official in Washington, the president no less, to exploit us in those terms and not to take stock of his own house, I think was the Sun's point, and it was a view that I concurred with.
Yeah. I want you to talk a little bit in two questions, placing yourself in Black America. I know that you're a New Yorker, but spent a lot of time at Bennett, on the campus of Bennett College.
Oh.
And then also we usually end with the question of the power, the strength of Black America, and what you think that may be. So, so you're a New Yorker, but...
I'm a New Yorker, born in Harlem. I spent my early life at the Riverton, so shout out to the Riverton folks in the audience.
Right.
We're a mighty tribe. But yes, I'm the granddaughter of an HBCU president, my beloved Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so like so many of us, I spend my summers making that reversed migration to my grandmother's home, which was on the Bennett campus the rest of her life until the 1980s. And it is a place to which I still return and am very devoted. It's a wonderful institution, still educating African American women now for the 21st century, a really vital institution and one very dear to my heart.
And is that where the pursuit of history came?
Absolutely. I grew up in a household where knowing our history was essential, and of course I'm a child of the Brown era, and so history is being made, right, in our living rooms, on our porches, in our neighborhoods. Greensboro, as many of your viewers know, is the home to some of the very important student sit-ins, and Bennett Bells are there at the Woolworths during those demonstrations. So we very much grow up with a view of history as essential to understanding who we are and who we need to be in our own time.
And the power, the strength of Black America?
For me, I think I wanted to say something, it's something like our persistence, right? But actually, I want to say, for me, it's our beauty. And one of the other wonderful parts of my growing up is that my father worked here in New York for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And so we spent time in museums and being introduced to Black Americans who were expressing themselves through the fine arts, our painters, our sculptors. And when I need to know who I am or I need to be replenished, I take myself today to the Baltimore Museum of Art, where many Black artists are prominently featured, and that for me is profoundly replenishing, but not only for me, I think for anyone who visits those places.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Martha Jones, who is at Johns Hopkins University, a professor there, with a very fancy title, I might add, you know, and fabulous books and wonderful writing. And thank you, Birthright Citizenships. I want you to read that book because it's an important topic of today. And thanks to you out there for joining us as well. We'll see you the next time. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America.